Part of the effort to write new financial rules focuses on products with an alphabet soup of names such as MBS and CDS. Those are mortgage-backed securities and credit default swaps. They've been blamed for the 2008 financial crisis and are often called by critics too risky. Now the question is, are they too complex to be effectively regulated? And that's where I began when I spoke with Gary Gensler, chairman of the Commodity Futures Trading Commission.
Well, we do need to bring strong regulation to these markets. The financial system failed the American public, and the regulatory system failed. And these derivative contracts are meant to lower risk, and instead, of course, they heighten risk to the taxpayer. So we must get regulation in place on these markets.
But as they're becoming more interconnected, more complex, is efficient and effective regulation even possible?
Well, it's certainly far better than where we are now. We have to regulate the dealers themselves. These are these big financial institutions, as you say, that are both sometimes too big to fail and too interconnected to fail. And the way that we try to, cut across that interconnectedness is these things called clearinghouses. They've existed since the 19th century, actually, in futures markets. We need to bring that discipline to this marketplace.
You've got three components to regulatory reform that you've been pushing. You talk about the dealers, the originators of these complex products, and the sellers, really, to some degree, to effectively regulate them, have standard type of derivative contracts. So they're a little bit plain vanilla. They're not apples and oranges. They're all oranges, as the case may be, and to have that centralized clearinghouse. How do you think these steps would have changed the situation that AIG found itself in?
Well, I think that AIG, which is just became cancerous to our economy, would have been more effectively regulated as a dealer, that they would have had to have capital against if they failed. They would have had to post up real money. Like if you buy a house, you have to have some money and put money down. If you buy a car, you have to do it. AIG was not doing that on these derivative contracts that they had.
Using the house as a metaphor again, Chairman, some critics point out there are buyers and sellers of, for instance, what would be effectively fire insurance when they don't even own the home. Should that kind of practice be regulated out of existence?
Well, I think that we need to regulate this one product called credit default swaps a little bit more than the other derivatives. That's why I've called for, and the administration has called for, that the Securities and Exchange Commission be able to protect against manipulation in these markets as they do in the securities markets. So it's calling for additional regulation, and that the SEC could set position limits, not an outright ban, but regulating for manipulation and being able to set position limits at the SEC.
There's another market of credit default swaps I want to ask you about. These swaps are on U.S. bonds settled in euros. Is it even a market that needs to exist, considering the default risk of the U.S. government is effectively zero?
I think that a product like you've just said should trade openly. People should see it trade openly, just as interest rate derivatives trade. If they keep staying in a dark ocean, we're not going to know what's going on. So we need to bring them onto transparent trading venues.
Chairman, does it bother you at all as a regulator or even as an American that there's someone out there willing to make a bet on effectively the default of the U.S. government? Well,
this is a great nation. I don't think there's any doubt in my mind that we're not going to default on anything. But I imagine there have probably been people betting against us since the revolution. I think it's a bad bet on their part.
Chairman, thank you. CFTC Chairman Gary Gensler.